Hey folks, Dr. Plague here. Just popping in to say thanks for spending your holiday season with me. I know the holidays are a little hectic, trust me, I'm well aware of that. And to have you come back every night to hear my stories just really warms my heart. I really appreciate all the warmth and kindness that you guys give me in my comment section, and I couldn't think of a better Christmas present than having all of you here to listen to the last night of the Yule Lad stories. Yep, here we are on the final 13th day of Christmas. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the last episode of the Yule Lads. December 24th, Kurtisneaker. The wind was howling like an angry animal as I drug myself and my wicker basket to the scorched trees the next night. The snow blew, the flurries fell, and the ground crunched underfoot as my thick boots came down through the crust of ice. Sausage Snatcher thrashed in the basket as we went, trying to make my progress harder, but I was set on my destination. Ulf was waiting for me in the burnt-out ruins at the edge of the farm, and I was going to get him back. Arnar had found me that morning, processing what was going on. Ulf never came back last night. I nodded, too tired and too numb to do much else. He came here to help you. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Is he dead? I looked up, surprised. Of course not. Your son is made of sterner stuff than that. Arnar nodded, but seemed relieved nonetheless. They have him, then. I'll get him back, I answered, already realizing that I'd travel to hell and back and fight all the little goblins, if it meant getting Ulf back. Arnar raised an eyebrow. And what might you have that the lads would want? I nudged my basket with a boot, and it started kicking and cursing as Sausage Snatcher tried to free himself. One of their own. I expected the old farmer to get angry when he realized what was in the little cage. He would say that he had told me not to cross Fae, and ask what I had done. I had trapped one and held it prisoner. I expected him to reprimand me, threaten to put me out, maybe even knock me out and try to bargain with them for his son's return. Arnar was of the land, after all. It wouldn't be outside the realm of thought that he might know a way to contact the Fae, just for misunderstandings like this. Instead, he surprised me by laughing in that deep, rich way that he had. I knew you Englishmen were capable of getting sand in your craw, but my God, boy, have they agreed to a meeting. I showed him the note, and he sucked in a breath as he read it. That place. I figured they would want to meet there. Why? What's so special about it? Did Ulf never tell you about his forebear, Gorl? I looked down at the axe that sat between my legs. It was all Ulf had left behind when they took him, and I hadn't known how heavy it was until I tried to pick it up. Ulf had carried it in one hand, but I would have likely been overbalanced if I tried to swing it with both. It felt old, even though I'd seen the handle replaced not 10 years ago. It was a relic out of time. Something that had spilled Fae blood before, if the legends were to be believed. Maybe it would again. He mentioned it. He said he fought Fae a long time ago, before the farm was founded. Arnar nodded. This land was once occupied by a different family, an old family that held the Fae in their regard. Gorl and his men burned them out, taking their land as was custom back then. Those were different times. That was how things were done. But the Fae didn't like it. They tried to drive him out, but Gorl was made of stronger stuff. He held his own, burning their grove and sent them fleeing to the next holdout. The scorched trees are all that's left of that grove, and none of Gorl's children have dared return to that place since he passed. I have to go there. He stood with me. I won't repay him by leaving him to his fate. Arnar nodded. We'll keep an eye on Davin. Take that axe with you when you go. Maybe it will do you some good. More good than it did him. The axe was hanging from my belt now. I hoped I wouldn't have to use it, but nothing lately had been easy. I was physically exhausted, my body ready to drop, but I had to get to the grove before midnight. If they arrived before I did, they might take Ulf and then leave. Then I would never find him again. If this struggling little bastard could get Ulf back, I would consider it an even trade, no matter what happened afterwards. Once I traded my bargaining chip, I didn't figure I'd live to see New Year's. I'd spent the day trying to sleep, trying to rest, but my overcomplicated mind returned to things again and again. Whenever I would slip off for even a minute, I would see the axe falling to the ground and watch Ulf get pulled into the ceiling by the laughing little devils. Then I'd come screaming awake as I tried to grab him. I had managed maybe an hour, my mind screaming at me to lie back down as I put on my pants and boots and prepared to leave for the meeting. After this was all over, I'd probably sleep for a week straight, but tonight I had work to do. I could see the scorched tree rising like a skeletal finger amongst the stumps. The area around the tree was strange, always chilling, and it was the only place clear of snow. Snow didn't gather here. Animals didn't gather here. Nothing but dead grass and stumps gathered here. The thought that Ulf's forebears would have burned these trees was unthinkable. Trees were rare in Iceland. More than 3 trees clustered together was an anomaly, and Iceland isn't exactly known for its thick forests. As I got closer, I saw a small, well-dressed figure sitting on the remains of the tree. The little creature was the antithesis of his brothers. He wore an immaculate red coat, a vest with gold buttons, trim black slacks, and a monocle that looked out of place on his toadish face. He reminded me of a banker. His few hairs swooped back, and his facial hair was cut almost invisibly. His frightful appearance, though, made the suit look alien. "Ah," he said, pulling out his pocket watch on a long chain as he checked the time. "Early for all that. Punctuality is not a trait I am accustomed to in your kind." His voice was rich and cultured, and he spoke English to my astonishment. "Are you Kurtznicker?" "Yes, indeed. It seems you have something that we want. When one of your kind wants something from one of my kind, I am the lad to broker such a deal." He grinned at me, but his pointy teeth did not present anything close to reassurance. "I must say, given what I've seen of your brothers, you are a surprise." He smiled again. "As the Yule lad responsible for stealing candles, something that was quite a sought-after commodity when I first began, I found that sometimes it's best to develop a hook. People are more willing to trust a traveler on the road, a stranger on his own, maybe even a lost child. Someone who looks like me and sounds like my brothers isn't going to get very far in this world." "Speaking of my brothers," he said, segueing into the heart of the matter, "where is dear old Brugnekeiger?" I lifted the basket, but it was pretty clear that he could hear the awful little creature kicking around inside. "Where's my brother?" I asked, answering him with a question of my own. He sighed. "Straight to it, then." He whistled, and I saw a group of 11 marching someone with a bag on their head out of the snow. How had I missed him? Ulf was closer to 7 foot than 6, and his clothes were stained with red runners of blood. He didn't fight his captors as they let him out either. His head was bent, and he was silent all the way. "Take off the hood," I barked, not trusting this Ulf for a second. I had grown up on stories of changelings, and this smacked of a double cross. Ulf was not precisely the target demographic for changelings, but they might have employed one nonetheless. The last thing I needed was a member of the Fae in the Longhouse, or the wrath of Arnar when his prized son was lost. Kurtznicker rolled his eyes dramatically. "Such theatrics! Why would I bring you the wrong human?" "Because it's the sort of thing that fairies do." He wrinkled his nose at the word, but said something to Patricksfell in the odd language of theirs. The little armored lad used his hook to snatch the bag off of Ulf's head, and I winced as I saw Ulf's beaten face. His eyes moved around widely, both swollen into raccoon pits, and when they fell on me, he grinned in a gap-toothed way. He looked terrible, his face a lumpy mash of bruises and swollen flesh. Some of his teeth were broken, some of them were missing, but he smiled grotesquely, regardless of the pain it caused him. "Frady, thank God. I wasn't sure you would make the trade with these little rats for me." I looked at Kurtznicker. "What the hell did you animals do to him?" He only shrugged. "He resisted, very strenuously. My brothers do not possess the same restraint that I do, and they became tired of his antics. I doubt my brother has suffered any less at your hands." "Prick his finger," I said, some of the smile sliding off of Ulf's face. Kurtisnicker produced a stiletto from his belt, something that had started life as a letter opener, I had no doubt. He pricked Ulf's finger and squeezed a few drops of the big man's blood out as he squirmed. He invited me to have a closer look then. In the light of the moon, it was hard to tell. All blood looks black under the moon. But in the light of my flashlight, I could see his blood was red as it trickled into the snow. If it bleeds red, it's usually human. "Sorry, I had to be sure." Ulf nodded. "I'd have done the same. Can't be too careful with the Fae." "Now then, since you've seen that we do indeed have your brother, maybe you could show us that you have ours." I took the top off the basket, spilling the little creature out onto the burnt earth, trap and all. His brothers made to approach, but I brought out the axe and held it close to the prone lad. I did not have Ulf, and I was not about to take chances. He slumped in his trap, the other lads chuckling at his plump, greasy form as he sat there looking rumpled and unhappy. Kurtisnicker shook his head at the little fellow and looked up to me with a spread of his hands. "So, do we have a deal?" "Cut him loose. I'll need his help to free this one," I said, tapping Sausage Snatcher with my boot. The immaculate little goblin waggled a finger at me. "And if you two go running back to your home?" "There's 12 of you. I figure you can catch 2 humans in the snow if you really need to." Kurtisnicker laughed. "You are correct, of course." He turned to the other lads and spoke in that weird, guttural language of theirs. One of them cut Ulf free and shoved his legs as he tumbled towards me. I bent to the trap, not making eye contact with the lads as I waved Ulf over to help. The two of us pulled the teeth apart, the hinges a little stiff from being closed for so long, and Sausage Snatcher zipped out as soon as the teeth were wide enough for him to pass. He eagerly joined his brothers, seemingly none the worse for wear, despite having been in the trap for 4 days. Kurtisnicker turned to go, his brothers already leaving, but I had one more question for him. "So when will you all be back?" He wrinkled his deformed brow, looking more like a gremlin from the movie. "Pardon? I've traded away my bargaining chip, so I'm asking when you and your brothers are going to come back for me." He laughed again, but it was a malicious sound now, devoid of the warmth that had been there before, if ever it had been. "Fear not, man-thing. I've taken the last of your treasures as of tonight, so we'll consider your little mistake paid for." "What?" I asked, taking a step towards him. "What are you talking about?" "How much do you know about me?" he asked indulgently. "You're the candle stealer. You steal candles from people, right?" He seemed to think about that before he answered. "That's true, technically. But since the invention of electricity, candles are a bit hard to come by. Mother's always hated them anyway. The wax gets ground up in her teeth, don't you know? Unlike many Fae, sometimes we Yule lads have to adapt a bit to keep ourselves relevant. Now I wonder, do you know what my mother loves to eat?" Ulf sucked in a breath, but I only shook my head as the wind whistled around us. "Children. Children are Mother's very favorite food in the entire world. That's why, not to toot my own horn, I am her very favorite amongst all her boys. Because what is a child but the light of a household?" The ice running in my veins had nothing to do with the weather. I felt like someone had slugged me in the guts. "I'm sorry to say that while you prepared to rescue one brother, you quite neglected another. He's a little old for our mother's taste. She prefers them still smelling of the womb, but I dare say that he'll make a fine offering. Our business has concluded. Have a very merry Yule," he said, tipping into a little bow. I charged him, not giving a damn what followed, but as my hands clamped on his arm, he turned into mist before my eyes. He smiled as he disappeared, his teeth white and perfect and absolutely terrifying in their certainty. I shouted into the winter wind, voicing my impotent rage. As the creature disappeared back into nothing, Ulf tried to console me, but I brushed him off and started running for the longhouse. It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. Arnor's house was safe. His house was a refuge from the winter and the problems of the world. I came onto the porch quite suddenly, not sure how I had gotten there. Everything moved in a blur, the world like a shot in a movie where the camera runs on tracks. Sigrun came out of the kitchen, but I flew past her as I ran for the back room. He'd be there, snug in bed and safe, and I'd be able to laugh at how the old goblin had gotten one last jab in at me. The cold air hit my face when I opened the door, and my stomach dropped when I saw the bed. The only thing in it was Grendel's yowling form, his leg bleeding again. He had tried to pull himself out of his convalescence bed. He tried to go after them when they took Davin, and as he moved pathetically on the coverlet, he looked out the window as the cold snow blew back in his face. Davin was gone. I've been sitting on the bed, petting and trying to console the Black Tom for nearly an hour. I know what I have to do, but I don't know how to begin. The legends are very clear on who their mother is and where she resides. Grella and her husband, Le Paludi, live in their cave in the Dimmelborgu lava fields, or so the legend says. He may already be dead for all I know, but I can't just leave him there. I'm going to find him, even if it kills me. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Happy holidays, and thank you so much for joining us for the Yule Lads Diaries. I'd like to thank all of you for joining me for 13 nights of Yule Lads, right up until Christmas Eve, just as promised. Wait, was that what I promised, though? Or did I maybe promise you all the way up till Christmas? Oh, look at that. I just happen to have one story left. You guys didn't honestly think I'd leave you on a cliffhanger like that, did you? So be sure to join us tomorrow night for the thrilling conclusion of the Yule Lads, where we'll meet a couple of other Christmas legends that you may or may not have heard of. Tonight, however, we're meeting the 13th lad, Kurtisnicker, or Candle Stealer. Also called Candle Beggar, he steals candles, which were once sought-after items in Iceland. You could also eat them. I mean, they're made out of tallow, which is what he generally does. But like I said, he's probably the one I've changed the most. That line about the child being the light of the family seemed a little fitting when you remember what Grella, their mother, mostly subsides on. And I thought making him different would give his character a little bit more depth. Hopefully you're all staying warm and happy this Christmas Eve, and I thank you for joining me amidst your holiday celebrations. If your family, like mine, enjoys a little bit of spooky tales after the presents have been opened, I would suggest you come on down to my holiday playlist. I saved this suggestion for Christmas Eve night, and I think it's pretty fitting. It's called Holiday Confessions, and it talks about a priest who hears an odd confession from an even odder parishioner. Maybe a saint? Who knows? No matter what you're doing this evening, whether it's having a nice glass of eggnog or curled up in your corner in fear as Krampus stomps across your roof, I hope you'll join us for more holiday stories. Also, if you're not caught up on the Yule Lads stories, and this is your first time hearing one, maybe come down to the Yule Lads playlist and get all caught up. Given their size, I'm quite sure you can hit all 13 nights in a matter of hours. Just in time to ring in Christmas morning with the exploits of the Yule Lads and our most excellent narrator, that's me. If you're in a festive holiday horror mood, it's not too late to get your own copy of Fall Frights and Winter Chills. There's a link below. You can come on down to Amazon and get your own. Or if you'd like a signed copy, touch base with me. I'd love to get one signed for you. If you enjoy signed books, might I suggest you head on down to Patreon. For just $10 a month, you can have a signed copy of my book anytime I write one on your doorstep. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Martha, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. And from all of us here at Dr. Plague's World, have a wonderful evening and a spooky holiday season.